Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really critical, though honestly sometimes overlooked cornerstone of environmental consulting. We're going to demystify the NABET accreditation scheme, specifically looking at their mandatory grievance redressal mechanisms. If your organization assesses environmental impacts, well, you already know quality is absolutely everything. But what exactly happens when that quality gets questioned? Let's map out how complaints and appeals must be handled under the NABET scheme to keep your accreditation totally secure.
Think about the immense responsibility EIA consultants hold. You're quite literally shaping the future of both our environment and development. So with stakes this high, what happens when stakeholders inevitably disagree with a finding or a process or decision? Whether it's a client questioning your methodology or your own organization disputing a ruling from an accrediting body, conflict is just a natural byproduct of this complex work. Having a transparent, rock-solid conflict resolution process isn't just a best practice. As we'll see today, it's literally an absolute necessity for survival in this industry.
So, here's our agenda for today. First, we'll cover the need for accountability. Then, internal grievances, specifically Procedure B10. Third, external grievances and NABET appeals. And finally, the cost of non-compliance.
Starting off with Section 1, the need for accountability, and how we build trust in EIA.
It might actually surprise you to learn that the scheme doesn't view complaint management as some administrative burden. It's actually a core pillar of your quality management system. Under the NABET scheme, managing complaints is definitely not an optional, nice-to-have task. It's a strict, mandatory requirement designed to guarantee transparency, accountability, and a genuinely systematic approach to resolving grievances. The scheme completely recognizes that to build real trust in environmental clearances, there has to be a rigorous way to resolve issues. This ensures fair resolutions for everyone. Without it, the integrity of the entire EIA process would basically crumble.
Moving right along to Section 2, internal grievances. This is Procedure B10, your first line of defense.
Okay, let's dive into this one. Appendix B of the NABET scheme outlines the QMS requirements, and Procedure B10 specifically dictates how you've got to handle complaints that come directly from your clients. Think of it as a structured life cycle. First, you actually have to actively inform your clients that they even have the right to complain or appeal. Second, you need a formal system in place to accept and handle that grievance. Third, you don't just say sorry, you take documented corrective action. And fourth, you review the whole situation at your management review meeting.
And these steps build into some very specific, mandatory requirements. B10 mandates that grievances have to be disposed of within a reasonable time frame. You literally can't just let an angry email sit in an inbox. You must clearly define who has the authority and the responsibility to handle it. Plus, it's not just about putting out the immediate fire, right? You're required to implement preventative actions so that the exact same issue never rears its head again. And, probably the most important thing for your next audit, you have to maintain incredibly detailed records of the whole ordeal.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that when it comes to those records, the standard QFM 301 document leaves absolutely zero room for ambiguity. You've got to log the complainant's name, the specific date and nature of the complaint, the exact corrective action taken, and a complete timeline of your communication with the authorities or the client. Look, if an auditor comes knocking, this comprehensive tracking table is the very first thing they're going to ask to see.
And here's where the loop finally closes internally. Mandatory oversight. NABET is super specific here. Every single complaint and appeal has to be addressed in the organization's upcoming management review meeting, or MRM. Why? Because this guarantees top-level management oversight. It makes sure that issues aren't just, logged away in a spreadsheet by mid-level manager and forgotten. They are actively reviewed by leadership to prevent those systemic failures from ever recurring across your other projects. Okay, Section 3, External Grievances. Let's talk about NABET appeals and disputing accreditation decisions. So, the scheme outlines two distinct external mechanisms if you find yourself disagreeing with an accreditation decision. First up, there's a review of decisions. This is essentially your initial reconsideration. You submit your specific complaints along with documentary evidence, and the NABET's accreditation committee takes another look. But if you're still not satisfied with that outcome, you have the right to a formal appeal. An appeal is a pretty significant escalation from a review, and it comes with its own set of very strict procedural protocols. Let's trace that escalation path because it is strict. Once that initial review decision is made, if you're unhappy with it, you submit an appeal along with a fee and your supporting documents. From there, NABET forms a specialized 3-member committee. This committee is chaired by a NABET board member and includes a subject specialist.
Then, a formal hearing is convened, everyone gets a reasonable notice period, and both the appellant and the NABET Secretariat present their cases. It's really designed to be an equitable, structured, almost legal-style process that gives both sides a genuinely fair hearing before any final decision is intimated.
Which brings us to Section 4, the cost of non-compliance. Let's look at suspension and debarment. The stakes here are just incredibly high. Under Section 9.3 of the scheme, failing to adhere to these strict protocols can result in immediate suspension, cancellation, or even outright debarment. The grounds for this? Things like submitting false information, concealing critical environmental data, failing to report mandatory legal changes, or violating the overall code of conduct. And make no mistake, if fraudulent practices are confirmed, whether that's by NABET audits, statutory bodies, or the National Green Tribunal, you will lose your accreditation entirely. The system literally has zero tolerance for misrepresented facts. To really understand why these rules are so uncompromising, we have to pull back and look at the big picture. Right in the introduction to the scheme, QCI leadership actually included this quote from Albert Einstein. "Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better." They put that in there to remind every single consultant of the broader environmental weight and the ethical duty of their work. Procedural compliance isn't just about ticking a box to pass an audit. It's about honoring our deep commitment to preserve the environment for the next generation. Which leaves us with a pretty crucial question to end our explainer today. Take a hard look at your own organization right now. Are your internal procedures robust enough to uphold the integrity of our environment? When that inevitable disagreement arises, is your quality management system actually ready to handle it transparently, or is your accreditation currently at risk? It might just be time to pull up your QMS manual and double-check those B10 protocols. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and keep striving for quality in everything you do.